So I'm going to spend a few minutes going over the basic ideas of specification grading, which is the grading that we're going to use in Chem 131. So specifications grading is a little bit different than most of you are used to. It was designed around the idea of giving a student more ownership of their own grade and also forcing students to think about their grade as a whole instead of trying to think about, oh, can I score just a few more points here to make up for really bad performance over there? The basic tenets are, one, a lot of the assessments are going to be pass-fail. Now, pass-fail doesn't mean pass at 70%. It means pass at whatever the criteria your professor gives you. So you're going to notice that most of the grades in the class are kind of 1 or 0, meaning proficient or not proficient, so pass-fail. The only ones that aren't in the class are the summative part A's and the final exam. Second, to go along with that idea that a pass is not necessarily just a, bare minimum, we set the specs at where we think is acceptable work. And where I've set the specs are roughly 80% on most things. 80% would be considered proficient. And this is because I don't want you to think about doing the bare minimum, right? Now you can get to just a 2-point and you don't have to pass everything, but I want to see good quality work. I don't want to see just throwing crap out there hoping for a few partial credit points, because you're not going to find partial credit. All right. Another thing about specs grading is this idea that you're getting into what's called mastery learning, meaning that you don't want to just give people grades and tell them what they did wrong. You want to give them the opportunity to learn from the critiques you give them and demonstrate that they have evolved their learning from that they've internalized the critique and they've come up with a better way to do something. So you're going to get opportunities to go more than one bite at the apple at a lot of this stuff. We're going to bundle things. So we're going to talk about how each spec has a certain criteria that you have to meet. And as long as you meet that criteria, you can't get a grade lower than that spec. And then last but not least, the higher grades in the course are going to come from more of the bundles, more of the specs being completed at a proficient level. Now, I keep talking about specifications or specs, so what does that mean? Well, that's the assessments we use, the types of assessments we use, right? And these are the assessments for our course. The PACE assessment, the pretest, the chapter formative, the summatives A and B, the pre-labs, the lab report, and the final. And each of these has different criteria for what is acceptable versus non-acceptable work. The PACE assessments are fairly straightforward. They're 5 questions. They're used, honestly, they're mainly used to denote attendance. Now, there is an aspect of them of kind of general overview of basic topics in an area, but they're not supposed to be challenging. They're mainly there as kind of a placeholder for taking attendance for federal guidelines. But you do have to do them. Now they're each 5 questions, so you've got to get 80% or higher on it by the due date. So that means that you got to get 4 out of the 5 correct. But you can repeat it as many times as necessary to get there. So this is what we call formative. Formative means you're allowed to repeat the assessment to learn from your mistakes, right? So the PACE assessment will be a formative type of assessment. Now, the pretests are in some ways the easiest, but they're also the most forgotten one. The pretest is more for me, right? It's a survey. You get a set of questions, and after each question, you're also getting a question that says, how confident are you in the answer you just gave me? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this data and I'm going to look at it, and that allows me to decide what I need to emphasize and what I don't need to emphasize when I'm doing the live sessions. Because it may be that I look at the data from the class and realize that everybody gets topic A. So I don't need to spend a tremendous amount of time on topic A because everybody gets it and everybody's confident they got it right. But topic B, everybody was really confident in it, but wrong. So I need to spend more time on topic B. So this is about helping me help you, to use a trite cliche. The proficiency is just that you finish it by the due date, right? There is no right or wrong answers to it, but you do have to do it by the due date. Now the chapter formatives, these are the quizzes. Now it says chapter formative, but when we get to the later units, it's going to be more than one chapter at a time. But at the beginning, it's per chapter. So the chapter formatives are exactly that. They're quizzes, they're formatives, so you can repeat them as many times as necessary to get the proficient level, which is 80%, right? If I remember right, I set each of those at 10 questions, so you gotta get 8 out of the 10 right. Now we get to the summative assessments. Summative assessments are where you demonstrate your mastery, where you show me that you've taken the practice, you've taken the formatives, you've internalized that, you've processed it, and you've come up with a learning structure. So the first one is the Part A. The Part A is the machine-graded JetNet test. So multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank type stuff. Things that a computer can deal with. Right? You get 2 tries at these. They're each 40 problems, and you get 45 minutes, which means if you haven't studied, you're going to be in trouble because you won't have enough time to look up all the answers. I'll know immediately the people who are just trying to look up the answers in the book. I know you've got the book sitting beside you. Why? Because I'll see that you did really well on 15 out of 40 problems, but you didn't finish in time. So you looked up 15 answers. Yay, you still failed, right? This one is a little bit different than the other ones because this isn't a proficient, not proficient. This is an aggregate average of your scores. There are 4 summative Part A's, so we're going to take all 4 of your scores and then take the average of them. All right, we're going to talk about a redo in a second here, but just to deal with the problems of online testing and getting kicked out and all that kind of crap, you get 2 tries at each of them. They take the higher of the 2 scores, right? Now the Part B is the more challenging of the summatives. This is the word problem section. And as I showed you in class today, each of them are 5 questions. And to be deemed proficient, right? To be deemed proficient, because this is a pass-fail type thing, you got to get 3 of the 5 questions correct, right? 3 of the 5. Now, for the most part, each question is a pass or fail. I will occasionally give you an acceptable on a question, which means I count it, but you did make a mistake. And that's if the mistake you made was trivial. It didn't get at the core of what the question was doing. You just made some stupid math error, for example. But that's up to me. What I consider trivial versus what you consider trivial might be different, but that's why I'm the content expert, so I decide what's trivial. Pre-labs, as you saw in the class today, pre-labs are short little sets of questions about the lab procedure, about reference values, or about concepts we're doing in the lab. You're given 3 to 4 questions. I give you a rubric that tells you exactly what I'm looking for in the answers, and you just have to complete it. And the lab report's the same way. Lab report's a write-up. I give you a rubric on what should be in the write-up, be completed by the due date to get proficiency. Now, specifications look like this. Each specification gives you what you have to do to meet that spec. So these are the requirements to get a 2-point. Now the first one's kind of a trivial one. It's in all of them. It's the, can you do the stuff that's supposed to be done in class? So all group course preparation assignments are completed. So this is the pre-test and the lab safety quiz and the PDF upload and all that stuff. It's trivial, but it's a good way to feel out who's having issues with working in JetNet and who's not. You'll notice the PACE assessment's actually pretty high. You're like, well, it's a 2-point. That's, the lowest passing grade, and it's still 5 out of 7. Well, yeah, but the PACE assessments are 1, easy. They're 5 questions. You can do as many times as you need to get the right answers. And 2, they're important because they're used to determine attendance for federal guidelines. So yeah, I set a little high. Pretest and chapter formatives. Again, formatives, you can do multiple times for the formative. But notice, these are about 50%, 3 out of 7 and 3 out of 6. So not asking for the moon here, just asking for, good faith effort. Aggregate average of at least 70% on the Part A's. So you got to at least hit the 70% mark on the multiple choice type questions. You'll notice there's no Part B in here. Part B is the harder of the summatives, and it's the more advanced understanding. I don't expect you to be able to master the Part B's if you're at a 2-point level, right? But I do expect you to be able to pass the Part A's if you're at a 2-point level. And you'll note pre-lab and lab report is 6 out of 12 for each of them, so 50% basically for each of those. Now let's contrast this with 4-point. 4-point, you've got all course preparation materials, again, trivial. 6 out of 7 PACE assessments, so again, not 100% perfect. But now we go to 5 out of 7 pretest and 5 out of 6 chapter formatives are proficient. All right, so we've upped the stakes a little bit. Aggregate average of at least 85% on the summative part A's. 3 of the 4 part B's are proficient. I will tell you that's the only one that gets that high. 3.5 is only 2 of the 4, right? And then 10 out of 12 for the pre-labs and 10 out of 12 for the lab reports. So higher, but not perfect, right? I don't expect you to be perfect in anything, but I expect it to be a lot higher than a 2-point. Now, there are a couple of ways you can improve your score. As I talked about in class, we have what's called revise and resubmit. So on the pre-lab and the lab report, I'm going to grade it. And you're going to have a 4-day grace period after I grade it. So when I grade it that first time, you're either going to get proficient, which could also be written as acceptable, meaning, yeah, it's there, but you made a small little trivial mistake here, and here's a mistake you made. Or it's going to say revise and resubmit, which means something's wrong. And then it's going to tell you what's wrong. It's not going to tell you the answer, but it's going to tell you where the problem is. And you have 4 days to go back in there and change it, right? After that 4 days is up, I'm going to come back, I'm going to grade all the revise and resubmits again. If you've corrected the problem, you will get a proficient and go on. If you have not corrected the problem or you have failed to correct it correctly, you will get a not proficient on that assignment, either pre-lab or lab report. So this is that mastery learning, that idea that you give critique not to lower a grade, but you give critique to enable people to better answer the question and to hopefully learn from that. So take advantage of this, right? If you see revise and resubmit, work on it. Send me an email saying, hey, what do you exactly mean here if it's not clear to you? We also do have a kind of makeup on the part A's and the part B's. Now it's a little bit different because it's not the same as mastery learning, but it's the same idea, right? The part A, you'll just get another bite at the apple. So, right, say we get to the end of the semester and you've got a 69% on your average for part A's, which isn't high enough for a 2-point. But you look back and you say, that first test, I got a 50% on. I can do a hell of a lot better than that now on the first test. And you send me an email and you say, hey, can I take another try at part A for unit 1? I'll say, sure. I'll set it for 1 day, 1 attempt. You get that 1 try at it, so that'll be a 3rd try on it. And it takes the best of the 3 scores. So now instead of getting a 50% on it, you got an 80% on it, and that boosts up your average, and you're above 70%. Now the part B is a little bit different because when I give you the answer, when I grade your part B, I'm going to send back the actual answers to the problem. So I can't give you the same part B because you'll already have the answers to it. So instead what I'll do is I will give you an equivalent part B, and you'll have 24 hours to do it and resubmit it. But you only get 1 of these, right? 1 part A and 1 part B. That's it. And it's going to be by 4/29. That's just so I have time to grade it before the grades are due, right? Most people do it. Most people don't do it on the 4th one. They usually do it on 1 through 3. Now, the final exam. This is where I want you to breathe a little bit. The final exam is cumulative, but to be honest, all chemistry exams are cumulative. It is required that you take it to pass the course. All right? It's multiple choice, 60 questions, 1 try at it on 1 day. Done. However, the final exam is not really about changing your grade to me, right? The final exam to me is more about telling me where the good parts and the bad parts of the course are. Where did you guys understand stuff and where did you not? So that allows me to improve the course the next time. So I'm not using this to lower your grade. You can do as bad as you want on this. It's not going to lower your grade. However, I want to incentivize you to do as well as you can so I get an accurate read on how the course went. So if you can score better than the next higher grade, final exam score on the rubrics, then I will raise your grade 0.5. Now I'll only raise it 0.5, so you can't go from a 2-point to a 4-point, but you can go from a 1.5 to a 2 or a 3.5 to a 4, right? By doing well in the final exam. So there's, a little carrot in front of it to go. So this is what a spec looks like. You're going to get these a number of times throughout the term, right? I typically do them after each unit exam. I send one of these out. It'll tell you how many possible in each of the rubrics, or how many possible in each of the groups, and how many you scored in your group. Now, what we're going to do, and I noticed that the numbers are a little off between these two, but we'll go with these. What we're going to do is they're then going to determine how high up on each assessment category you went, right? So if you look at this, on the prep, you went all the way to the 4-point level, but that should be a 4-point level. Pace, you got up to a 3-point because you had 5 out of 7. The pretest, you got up to a 4-point because you had 5 out of 7. Formative, you got to 3-point with 4 out of 6. Part A, you did pretty good. You got an 82%, so that took you to a 3.5. Part B, you got to 3.5 with a 2-point. But what hurts you in this one is the pre-lab and the lab report. You only got 7 out of 12 in both of those. And remember, 7 out of 12 is barely over 50%. So you didn't do too well in the lab. And that dragged you down to a 2.5, right? So before the final, your grade would be a 2.5 because your grade would be the lowest specification for which you have all of the criteria met, which would be a 2.5. However, you got a 76 on the final. And a 3-point is a 75 on the final. So since you got better than the next grade up, I raise your grade 0.5, so you end up with a 3-point for the final grade for the course. And that's how specification gradings works. You're going to see a number of these throughout the term. I'm going to give you descriptions of where you're doing well, where you're doing poorly, how you can improve for the next one. So it's going to be a little odd at first, but as we work through it, hopefully it'll make a lot more sense to you guys. So this is kind of a basic breakdown of specification gradings that will hopefully help you guys understand the process.